Many have heard of the infamous Alcatraz, designed to incarcerate the most dangerous criminals and isolate them from society. However, in the past, 3 inmates managed to escape the maximum security prison by evading the guards. Official reports claim they perished in the icy waters, but a mysterious letter in 2013 prompted the FBI to reopen the case. Frank Morris was 11 years old when he became an orphan and was placed into the foster system. He soon learned how to become self-reliant after being moved between a series of different foster homes. When he was 13, he connected with the wrong people and was convicted of his first crime. At 13, no one would have guessed that he would be the person to orchestrate the great escape from Alcatraz. By the time he was a young adult, he had seen the inside of several prisons across the U.S. Eventually, he ended up in what people refer to as the Alcatraz of the South in Louisiana. He managed to escape and roam free for a whole year before being caught again. The authorities weren't taking chances this time around, so they decided to send him to the maximum security prison, Alcatraz. During his time there, he crossed paths with the Anglin brothers and a man named Alan West. Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, and Alan West became the best of friends during their time serving in Alcatraz. It just so happened that each of the men had their own unique skill sets that they would need in order to pull off the greatest escape known in the history of America. They used their individual knowledge to come up with the perfect escape plan, all led by the cunning Frank. The plan was simple, but seemed impossible. They would have to execute it perfectly if they wanted it to work. However, they weren't the first to try and escape. In fact, more than 30 others had made the attempt before them, and all had failed horribly. What made these men think they could succeed? They were housed in adjoining cells, which made it easy for them to plot their plan. They took their time to plan out the finer details, ensuring they were prepared. But before they could do anything, they had to gather the necessary materials for the job. Lucky for them, Alcatraz had a factory where inmates worked, making furniture, clothing, and shoes for the U.S. military. The men had access to all kinds of materials and used them to their advantage. They also had another rare advantage that ensured they had the upper hand. They were all non-violent offenders, which was rare in Alcatraz. This meant they experienced less scrutiny from the guards. This allowed them to operate right under the authorities' noses as they began building the needed props for their escape. They knew they had to do more than just escape the fortress. They had to make sure they had enough time before the guards realized they were gone. Each man was given assigned tasks that had to work together seamlessly for the plan to work flawlessly. The Anglin brothers made dummy heads that would be left inside their cells. The dummy heads were made from soap, wax, toilet paper, and human hair found in the barbershop. Frank had to make an instrument that looked like an accordion. Meanwhile, the 4 men worked together to make the instruments they would use to unscrew the bolts of the vents and tunnel out of their cells. The idea was insane, but would it work? The men fashioned crude picks and wrenches from materials they found around the prison, including spoons from the cafeteria and pieces of wood from the workshop. Every day from 5:30 p.m. to 9:00 p.m., the men worked relentlessly, discreetly chipping away at their cells and widening the holes so they could fit inside. But what was on the other side? As the holes in their cells widened, they could see the unguarded utility corridor on the other side. There were bars along the walls that the men could use to climb up 3 stories, the wide shafts that led onto the roof. On that fateful evening in 1962, the men pried one of the shafts open with their homemade wrench, got onto the roof, and disappeared into the night. However, they had left one man behind. They had to leave Alan West behind when he couldn't widen his hole in time. The men had made life vests and a raft by gluing and stitching more than 50 raincoats together, and Frank's accordion instrument was used to inflate the raft and the life vests. After that day, Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin were never seen again. Because no car was reported stolen in or around Angel Island, it was presumed that they had never reached the shore until now. In 2013, the FBI was forced to reopen the case after the San Francisco Police Department received a shocking letter signed by a man claiming to be John Anglin. However, the letter's contents weren't disclosed to the public until 2018. The letter begins, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer." Yes, we all made it that night, but barely. The letter continued, "Frank passed away in 2008. His grave is in Argentina under another name. My brother died in 2011. This is the real and honest truth. I could tell you that for 7 years I lived in North Dakota and a year in Fargo, North Dakota until 2003. I am living in Southern California now. But that is not the only claim out there. There was another escape attempt that ended with the prisoners considered missing, but did they ever make it out? Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe were partners in crime, so naturally, they became partners in prison too. The two were infamous bank robbers who eventually got caught and ended up in Alcatraz, just like Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, and Alan West. But who were they, and how did their escape attempt differ from previous escapes? Both men lived in Oklahoma and became good friends before deciding to get into a life of crime. Not much is known about Theodore Cole or Ralph Rowe before they started breaking the law. The two started robbing banks in the mid-1930s and were eventually caught, but they didn't go straight to Alcatraz. By the time they were convicted, the men had robbed many banks. It seemed the judges were relatively lenient, not booking them a boat straight to Alcatraz. You'd think the men would be grateful. Instead, the men took their chances in their new prison and tested the warden's patience far beyond its limits. The two men went to Oklahoma State Penitentiary, also known as McAllister Prison. The prison seemed suitable for what they had done, but soon the judge would be proven wrong. The men would try their luck at escaping. Their first escape attempt ended with them getting caught, but nobody knew they'd try again. After their first escape attempt, the men were sent to a high-security facility in Leavenworth Prison. There, they were listed as escape risks and were only held temporarily. It seems a judge in the state had better ideas for them. They would be sent to the infamous escape-proof prison, Alcatraz. Ralph Rowe was originally caught by the police after a shootout in 1933. This resulted in his partner, Wilbur Underhill, passing away. This was the first time Rowe was caught by the police. Records are not clear on how Rowe got out and started robbing banks with Cole, but it seems Cole's punishment for getting caught was far more severe. Not much is known about Theodore Cole before he was convicted, other than that he was born in April 1899. He is only famous for his escape attempt with Ralph Rowe. After being convicted, Theodore received a dooming sentence, which explains why he was desperate to escape, a death sentence. The two men had planned their escape months in advance and used their unique jobs to orchestrate the plan. They worked stripping old tires into rubber mats. These men spent months in the workshop grinding down the window bars and hiding the damage with tire grease. But how did they leave the island once the plan was in motion? They vanished between 1 o'clock and 1:30 a.m. during a head count on a pitch-black night with fog enveloping Alcatraz at its thickest. The men broke through the bars they had spent weeks weakening and descended to the beach below. However, their trail went cold at the shoreline. The tracks disappeared, leading officials to believe the men used makeshift floats crafted from tires to swim off the island. The strong currents could have easily swept them out to sea. Yet, over the years, numerous eyewitness accounts have claimed sightings of the men. This raises the question: did they survive and make it off the island, or were they carried away by the currents? The answer remains uncertain until more evidence emerges.